filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in Aspen, Colorado. And it's a pleasure to be with Howard Alden today, guitarist.
Nice to be here.
Welcome to Out West. Being born in 1958 in California, is that right?
That's correct.
Information's correct. Could you do surfer guitar if you wanted to?
Probably not if I wanted to.
No kidding.
I could probably. When I was growing up, I never had any interest in that kind of music. At that time, the types of guitar sounds I was hearing on the radio and stuff didn't really appeal to me. They always sounded kind of tinny and corny to me, quite frankly.
Yeah, Beatles and all that stuff?
Never was interested in.
It's interesting.
I was a real weirdo. And finally, I was kind of interested in the guitar. I used to see guitar players on television. I used to see actually country players on shows like Hee Haw and stuff like that, and it was kind of intriguing to me. And I started playing a four-string guitar when I was 10, and took it to the local music store, and mentioned that there was also a four-string banjo at home. These were in the closet. They belonged to some distant relative. And the guy was an old banjo player. He says, "Hey, bring in a banjo, kid." And so before I knew it, I was playing four-string banjo, learning how to read music, learning how to play tunes and stuff. And a couple of years later, I got a six-string guitar and was exposed to the records of people like Barney Kessel, Django Reinhardt, and Charlie Christian. I loved that sound, the sound of that guitar. I loved the sound of the, I guess what you call the classic jazz guitar sound.
Yeah.
Amplified archtop guitar. It sounded richer and fuller, and that just really hooked me on the guitar.
Did you get influence from your family, your parents? Were they musical or?
I'd say they were musical, but they weren't musicians.
Yeah.
You know, they had a lot of good records around the house. They had everything from jazz to light classical stuff and some show tunes and stuff like that. Yeah. And when I was very young, I came across some little 45 RPM records, and one of them I remember was a small group of Benny Goodman. One was a Count Basie with his rhythm section. It was like a Glenn Miller record, and some 78s of Tommy Dorsey's band and stuff like that. And I was drawn to those. I was really interested in them. And like I said, when I started playing then the stringed instruments when I was 10, I was drawn to that kind of music, and then especially when I heard like the records of the jazz guitarists.
When you said you learned to read on the string instrument, the banjo, whatever, was it typical? What do they call the music for guitar that's not all the notes?
Yeah, tablature.
Tablature. I couldn't think of the name. And was it that, or was it?
No, it was regular
both?
notes music.
Yeah.
You know, this was an older guy, and he had me start. You know, he says, "Okay, this is an A, this is a C." You know, and then he wrote down the notes, and I just started. So I got used to reading music, and he also had me, you know, playing songs right away, playing tunes. So I was playing music, playing things with chords and melody and stuff. Not a whole lot of, like a lot of people start out playing scales up and down and arpeggios and stuff, or else they just learn to strum chords by ear and stuff. So I was very lucky to have run into a teacher that got me started that way and got me playing tunes right away. And then when I was about 12, or I think it was about 13, I started playing in a pizza parlor in Southern California on the weekends. And so I got used to playing songs for an audience and stuff like that.
So you had a teacher who, as opposed to just scales and all that, would teach you tunes? Yeah,
right away, you know. Every week, a couple of different tunes, along with reading the notes, playing chords along with the melody and stuff, which was great training, you know, because I got used to playing things for people. You know, when you sit down and play something for someone, they want to say, "Hey, play the guitar or banjo." You don't play them a scale, you have to play them a tune or something. And I got used to performing live very young, too, when I was like 12 or 13. And at about that time, I picked up the six-string guitar and started trying to play that, too, so I was working that into the act.
Okay, at 12 years old, what kind of live performing were you doing?
A pizza parlor on the weekends, you know, with another banjo player and a guitar player, shopping malls.
Cool.
There was this, there was these banjo bands, believe it or not. They were more of a social than musical type of thing, but you get together with anywhere from 10 to 50 banjos and go play somewhere.
Yeah, I saw one of those in Los Angeles. I couldn't believe my eyes.
It's quite a sound, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like kind of a big beehive or something sometimes. Anyhow, and at that time then I was, again, trying to learn the guitar, both first by ear, listening to the records and stuff, and transferring the knowledge I had on the banjo over to the guitar, which is a different tuning, of course. And like that.
Yeah, and the tunes you were learning off records was it, I mean, you were into jazz at this time?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, on the banjo, it was more all the old standard tunes from the 20s, you know, and 30s and 1900s, you know, things like It Had to Be You and, you know, whatever, Chinatown, My Chinatown, stuff
Yeah.
like that. All tunes I'm still playing today. We'll probably play some of those tunes, you know, tonight.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and, you know, and then tunes off of the records I was listening to, the more contemporary jazz things, too, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just a wide potpourri of things.
So about what age were you when you started to say, you know, music could be a career for me?
I think I pretty much decided that when I was about 13. You know, I was performing all the time and felt comfortable doing it, and figured that I could probably make a living doing it.
Mm-hmm. What about your parents? Did they feel the same way?
Yeah, they were very
Yeah.
supportive, actually.
Great.
You know, it's very, very nice of them.
Uh-huh.
You know, I mean, there are a few hints about, well, you could become a doctor and then just play music for fun, you know, but
Right.
after a while they could see I was pretty much obsessed
Yeah.
with it.
I think they almost feel required to say something like
Yeah,
that.
right.
You know? Later on, they could say, "Well, we told you."
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have any college experience as far as music?
I had brief college experience. When I got out of high school, I went to, I was living in Southern California at the time, and I went to Cal State Fullerton because it was nearby and seemed to have a good music program.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, the music schools were still pretty much all classical oriented, and they wanted me to become a classical guitar major, and so I had to start studying the classical guitar, which is a different technique from the fixed style jazz guitar. Started getting that together, and after about half a semester, Howard Roberts, jazz guitarist in Southern California at the time, and who was also a great educator, he's a very brilliant teacher, he put together a school called, believe it or not, the Guitar Institute of Technology, which was basically a year-long program, full-time guitar music program,
Yeah.
like a trade school, I guess. And I decided I would learn more there, you know, being there and being in the real working music business and
Right.
stuff. So I wound up going there the first year it started, and learned a lot from a lot of the people in the business who were teaching there, people like Mundell Lowe and various people in LA at that time.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I was working a lot in the area, playing different jobs and stuff. So that was my college experience.
Right. Plus, those fellas had lots of studio experience too. I mean,
Exactly.
I imagine they just knew it all, or it could prepare you better what to expect.
Yeah, for the music business as such, you know, and being able to be flexible enough to make a career out of music. You know?
Uh-huh. Did it get to a point where, let me rephrase, did you eventually leave California
Mm-hmm.
to find a job, or did you leave California because you had a job?
Well, I left California. First time I left the West Coast, I was called by, of all people, Red Norvo, great vibes player,
Mm-hmm.
who at that time was just a distant idol of mine, you know, who I knew that Tal Farlow had played with him, and my first guitar teacher, Jimmy Weibel, had played with him for a long time too. And all of a sudden I got this call. I was actually teaching at this Guitar Institute of Technology a couple years later. It was during the day. I said, Howard, this is Red Norvo. And I said, you know, Jesus,
Wow.
you know. So anyway, he called me to spend a summer with him in Atlantic City in a trio, bass, guitar, and vibes, and 4 months, summer of '79, and I wound up doing it and getting a taste of the East Coast. Playing with Red every day, you know, for the 4 months was like a great apprenticeship. He was like a great mentor to me. I learned so much playing that summer. Type of things you don't learn in music schools, or, you know, naturally.
Like, can you mention a couple things?
Well, just a lot of aesthetic considerations and fine points about performing and listening and playing with people and playing contrapuntally, playing sympathetically, comping, solos, everything. It's just a whole aesthetic approach. And made a few trips up to New York on my weekends off and got a taste of the music that was happening up there, which was, quite frankly, you know, tons more than in California at that time. And it was the type of music I wanted to play too. There was kind of a bebop renaissance going on then, and just and a lot of the old pros were still playing, of course. So at that point, I was working back in California, doing a variety of jobs. You know, a little bit of studio work, some private parties and stuff like that, some shows. But really wanted to move back to the East Coast at that point, to New York. And about a year and a half later, got a call from Joe Bushkin, a piano player. It was referred by my friend Jake Hanna, who I had gotten to know. And so at that point, I made a trip back to play a couple of weeks with Joe Bushkin. And he had a return engagement coming a few months later for 2 months. So at that point, I decided just to pack up and move to New York, because I figured if I had 2 months' work, I'd get started pretty well.
Yeah.
And like that.
There you go.
Yeah.
You've been in New York since then?
Yes. Yeah, since 1982.
Well, I was reading through the list of people you've played with, and it's pretty extensive. I would imagine you have to be versatile enough to figure out what this particular person is going to need.
That's exactly
from
right.
a guitar player.
Definitely. Being a guitar player, being in the rhythm section, I get called to play with a lot of different people, you know, more so than a horn player, I think, you know, because a horn player is either going to be a soloist or part of a group sometimes, but usually either a major soloist or else play in a section in a big band.
Yeah.
So I tend to get called to play in a lot of small groups with different people, and Joe Bushkin, again, wanted one thing out of the guitar player, which was thrilling to play with him. And he's a great piano player and a great personality, too. Right after Bushkin, I ran into Joe Williams, and he asked me to join him for some engagements, which was a slightly different thing. He was very easy to work with, great guy. Ruby Braff, a cornet player, I got to know around New York. I started working with him, and he had, once he saw I was open to suggestions, he would suggest various things to me, too, as far as my accompaniment, as far as my playing, as far as my soloing, even. And Kenny DeVerne I play a completely different way with when I play with him. So
Is it possible to be specific about that?
Yeah, well, okay, let's see. First, like Kenny DeVerne basically likes rhythm guitar for accompaniment. He likes, you know, chunk, 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 chunk behind him. It's for soft, nice support for what he does. And then occasionally I play some parts with him, like clarinet and like that. Ruby Braff likes different accompaniment, like some punctuations in the chords. He doesn't like rhythm all the time. He likes sometimes. Again, he likes you when you do play a part with him. He wants to hear it fully, you know. And Joe Bushkin also, when I first started playing with him, I figured he's playing a lot of piano all the time, you know, so I figured with bass, drums, and guitar, I'll just play light rhythm guitar with him. So I started going, ching, ching, ching. He says, no rhythm guitar, you know, play horn riffs, you know. He wants a lot of active accompaniment stuff, you know.
Yeah.
He wants a lot of, you know, punctuation and stuff like that.
Right.
So basically, I kind of listen to the players and try to decide what is most fitting for them and what's going to make them feel most comfortable and what's going to make them sound the best, you know.
Do they use the phrase Freddie Green guitar with you?
Sometimes.
Occasionally.
Yeah, or just rhythm guitar. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times then I just make the decisions, and I think that's one of the reasons I've been able to work with so many people is I do go out of my way to figure out what is most appropriate for them and try to fit in and be a good accompanist, which I enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's a real art. With piano also, you can function in a rhythm section or just solo, you know, one-on-one with a person.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's your instrument of choice these days?
Well, guitar.
I mean the specific, the specific brand of guitar.
Oh, okay. Well, for the last five and a half years, I've been playing a guitar made by Bob Benedetto. He's a guitar maker. He's been making guitars for about 30 years now. And he's located in Pennsylvania. And he just makes handmade archtop guitars, basically. And,
yeah.
When I made the switch to 7-string, since you can't really go out into the music store and buy one that easily, he made me a beautiful 7-string, and he also made me a beautiful acoustic 7-string, you know, with no pickup, just dry.
Wow.
And he also made Bucky Pizzarelli's guitar, and quite a few other guys.
Does the 7-string require some relearning for you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
At first, I mean, basically it's just a 6-string guitar with an extra low A string. And at first you get used to just reaching down there for some bass notes now and then on the roots of the chords. But to develop really comfortably on it and have some kind of facility with carrying your lines through and making some of the voices different. It takes a little while. It took me about 6 months to be able to comfortably find the fourth string again. Because you look down there and see the sea of strings and
Oh, yeah.
get confused as to which is which. So sometimes, I took it right out with me right after I got it. I took it out on a tour to Europe on one-nighters with George Weah's Newport All-Stars. And for the most part, it was okay, but every once in a while, like, he'd ask me to do an introduction or play a solo piece. I'd have to go, okay, 1, 2, 3, okay. There's the fourth string, okay. Take it from there.
Yeah. Who was the first person that you heard do it with a 7-string? Was it George Van
It was
Epps?
George Van. I heard one of George's records again when I was about 14 or so. This part-time jazz guitar player who was also hanging around some of these banjo meetings knew that I was interested in guitar and I was starting, and he exposed me to all these records, you know, which was great. You know, very lucky to run into him. But I heard George's records, and let's see. George was not performing much for some time. He wasn't around. It was just kind of this legendary name with one record that I'd found. And then I also ran into Bucky when I moved to New York and heard him playing the 7-string. And every once in a while I'd pick it up and it's too much for me, too confusing. But eventually I got hooked on it. What happened was there were certain things, like a lot of my favorite musicians are piano players like Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, and et cetera. And there are pieces of theirs that I'd want to play on a guitar and didn't have the range or the right bass notes or the right voicings. And so between that and getting to sit next to George Van Epps and watch him play and see what he's able to do with it made me want to switch.
Yeah. Well, speaking of non-guitar playing influences, you've searched, didn't you do a record of Bill Evans' music also?
Yep.
Is his piano style difficult to adapt to the guitar?
Well,
or wasn't there a conscious effort to really, was it more of just a tribute, or was it kind of trying to cop his style?
I don't know if it's a matter of trying to cop his style, really. Maybe just some of his feeling toward music or his approach. Obviously, you know, on the piano, you can play a voicing with 3 notes right next together, and you can't on a guitar unless you have a hand about this long, you know. So I loved his music, again, since I first heard and always listened to it over the years. And mainly what I wanted to do is explore his compositions, though, you know, the way he put different things together. I knew he'd written a lot of tunes that don't get played very often over the years, and so I wanted to explore that. And there's probably a subconscious attempt to sound somewhat like him in some of the voicings, or simulate some of the sounds. You know, his melodic lines and his single note lines, of course, you know, can be adapted to any instrument, and they're always, you know, very logical and flowing and melodic.
There you go. Who are some of your favorite compatriots to work with these days?
Well, let's see. You just talked to one of them, Ken Poplawski.
Right.
We've known each other almost 15 years, probably about 12 or 13 years, and we play together quite often, both in a duo situation, which is a lot of fun. And next week we're working a trio with Michael Moore, and larger groups too, quartets and stuff like that. And he's great too, because we really do have like a musical conversation when we play. Either one of us can go any way at any time, and the other person is fearless enough to attempt to, you know, follow or not, as the choice may be. And he's got the flexibility on his instruments to pull off just about anything he thinks of. So I love playing with Ken. And Bucky I enjoy playing with. You know, there's a lot of different things. Warren Vacher back in New York I play with a fair amount. Again, and usually like trios or quartets. I tend to enjoy playing a lot of times with just like a guitar and one horn and a bass, because it seems a pure situation for me. You know, there's a lot of freedom, and also, I'm trying to think of conciseness. I don't know, yeah, I have the choice of either playing a full chord or just one note or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, it's like 2 voices plus a bass note makes it a complete musical experience, you know,
Right.
pretty much.
And without the drums, it's almost like everything you play becomes more important.
Exactly.
Because it's really much sparer. And
Definitely. Of course, you know, I love playing with drums too, you know, because every drummer makes me play slightly differently. And again, like Jake Hanna, of course, has been one of my great friends for years. He's helped me a lot, and I love playing with him because he is absolutely committed to the music. He's never compromising, always completely into it, and just great to play with.
Yeah.
And Michael Moore I love playing with too. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah. There's so many great musicians out there, and I wonder sometimes, like, how does everybody find work?
Yeah, I wonder that myself sometimes. And sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
Sometimes there's a few dry spells.
Yeah. Are you responsible for your own booking, pretty much?
Pretty much. I don't have any full-time manager or agent as such. A few people help me a lot. There's a guy in England that books me over there. When I usually go over there once or twice a year. And George Ween has been a lot of help over the years. You know, he has always put together things or provided, you know, employment opportunities,
Yeah.
which has been great. Yeah, but pretty much myself
Yeah.
at this point.
As you look at your income tax statement from one year to the next, does it seem like it's getting better as you go along?
Slightly better.
Yeah. Well, as long as
No
it's going
complaints.
upwards.
No, you know, I've been able to make a living, pay the rent, and play music that I love with people I love. So I feel
Yeah.
very good about that,
Right.
and haven't had to make any horrible sacrifices, lifestyle-wise. So, you know, of course, well, let's see what he'll probably tell you. What did Jake say years ago? He said, I try to keep the music simple and the overhead low, or something like
Yeah.
that.
I can't wait to talk to him.
Oh yeah.
You've played with some real legends in the music business, Benny Carter and Dizzy and all that. When that first happened, did you feel at all, was it nervous for you?
Not really nervous as such. Actually, I looked at it as just a great opportunity. You know, again, like the people I met when I moved to New York, like Ruby, Kenny, some of the old timers there, Doc Cheatham. You know, shortly after I moved to New York, I made a recording with Doc Cheatham, and you know, that was 15 years ago. And at that time, I was saying, "Wow, this is great! I'm getting to play with this guy. Probably his last record date. You know, at that time he was like 78 or something like that.
Right.
Little did I know that I'd be traveling around the world with him. You know, 10, 12 years later. You know,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. Same thing with Milt Hinton. You know,
Right.
and. But like for instance, yeah, Benny was quite a thrill. I remember I played on one of these jazz cruises on the SS Norway that they do every year. It was about 1987. Yeah, it was 87. I was on there playing basically with Flip Phillips and Kenny DeVerne and a few other people, and a couple of sets were put together with Benny and Mel Powell, piano player. I think it was Milt, Louis Bellson. I remember having a great time playing with him and everything. I mean, I was thrilled enough about that.
Yeah.
And then about a week later, after I got home, I got a call from Benny, and he said, "Oh, this young man, this is Benny Carter. You know, so, great. You know, I'm just wondering if you're available for a couple of sessions next week. You know." So,
Let me check
sure,
my book.
yeah, let me
right?
check my book. Yeah. And he said, told me where it was and stuff, and then he said, and let's see, well, it'll be Roland Hanna and Louis Bellson is going to make it, and George Mraz, and Diz is going to come by for a few tunes. And yeah. So after I changed my underwear,
That's fantastic.
No, I mean, these guys were just so nice and so casual about it, too, you know. And Benny was, you know, I remember going to the date and getting there a little early every day, naturally, and Benny would be sitting at the piano. It was all originals on this record we made, most of which he'd just written for the date. He's sitting there and he's saying, "Howard, come here. Do you think the bridge should end like this or like this, you know?"
My. Wow,
So,
what a spot.
That was quite a thrill, you know. And same thing, you know, getting to play fairly regularly off and on for a few years with the Newport All-Stars with Clark Terry, you know. It's just nice traveling with him every day and listening to him play every night. And,
Yeah.
I just sometimes I look back and can't believe the opportunities that were given me.
Is it possible to put into words how those gentlemen feel about what they do, do they consider it an art form, do you think?
That's hard to say, you know, because some of them.
I mean, we've almost elevated jazz
Yeah.
to a place now where, you know, it's part of Lincoln Center and it's
Right.
all that. And
Sure.
I was just curious is if those real veterans have that, if they always felt it was that thing, or just that now they're able to feel like that.
I think it may be a little bit of both. I mean, obviously, always loved and had conviction in the music and kept playing it all these years. When I look at someone like Clark, who is such an amazing, consistent player, I mean, night after night off these one-nighters, we'd all be tired and stuff, and every night he'd still have that same gorgeous tone and beautiful lines and stuff. But Clark is also like a great entertainer, and he's a great trooper. You know he's going to deliver no matter what. He's just in the habit of it. He can't help it, you know. I'm not really sure. Let me try to think of some other people.
I guess I'm thinking of Doc
Yeah.
Cheatham, who guys like that who were entertainers.
Right.
They were playing in pits and everything. And
Sure, just doing a gig basically.
Yeah.
You know, playing in a section in Latin bands. For
Right. I
20
suppose
years.
it's interesting for them to see that
Yeah.
the music is now I'm on stage at Carnegie Hall.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, even someone like Bud Freeman, who I got to know a little bit too. You know, he started out playing in speakeasies and stuff in Chicago,
Yeah.
and later was able to just tour around and just do his thing.
Right.
I don't. It's hard to generalize. I mean, each one of us is such a unique individual too.
Yeah. What's it like to travel overseas? Is the music accepted or not accepted in a different fashion?
I think it's accepted very well. You know, the main thing that I notice, I mean, is that in general, though, overseas, there isn't such a saturation of media, television. There aren't 90 channels of TV in France, or certainly not England, and various places like that. So I think people are more used to going out to live performances, and they enjoy it more. Of course, most of the time I go overseas, it's for especially either jazz festivals or special jazz clubs or something like that. I go over to England, like I said, once or twice a year, and the audiences there are great, very knowledgeable. I just got back from Australia a few days ago, my first trip down there, which was, aside from being a beautiful country and some great musicians down there too, the audience seems a little younger too. You know, it's in general, and I'm not sure. The same thing in England, I guess, in some places. Germany. I don't know, the reception's always been great.
Well, speaking of...
Oh, go ahead.
Go
sorry.
ahead. You go ahead.
Well, okay. In certain places like England and France, of course, there's like the old school, like the Hot Club of France, and it goes back to the 30s. And there's the old guys that know all the records and listen and scrutinizing and listening very carefully. And there's the younger people who just go because they enjoy music, you know. And that's what I like to see. Actually, is I like to play in a place where people just come in, hear the music, aren't necessarily, going to be scrutinizing everything carefully or compare it to the records they heard or stuff. But if they hear the music and they like it and enjoy it, that's the whole idea anyway. I mean, that's how it started,
Right. And when you look at the audiences that are at most of these jazz parties, it becomes a bit worrisome, I think, because there aren't the young faces.
Exactly. On the other hand, to come to a jazz party, it's more or less of a semi-exclusive thing. I mean, they don't say it is, but I think when you talk about having to pay anywhere from $150 to $250 for a weekend and come to a place like this and put yourself up, it's, in order to get the younger audience, you have to make it more affordable and more accessible, I think,
Right.
They just want to go into a bar and pay $5 maybe, or do a 2-drink minimum.
Yeah.
Like that. Like there's a little place in New York that I play every Monday night with some friends, with bass player Murray Wall and Chuck Wilson, the alto player. We've been doing it for about 9 months now. It's just a little neighborhood bar. Started out, it was empty on Mondays for the first few weeks. Now it's packed every Monday night, just with locals coming in and listening because they like the music. And there's no cover charge. I think he may have a minimum at the tables now, but it's nice to see,
Yeah. It's nice that you can get a little evening right in town instead of having always to leave town to play.
Exactly.
Yeah. You must get tired of airplanes, I would guess.
Yes. I didn't for the first 4 or 5 years, but I'm getting tired of them now. I admit it.
Yeah. Is it, what's your family situation? Is it hard to be on the road all the time
It's
like
not too hard. My wife is, I've been married for a little over 4 years, and
Uh-huh.
my wife is a musician. She's a singer. We actually met on a tour
Uh-huh.
over in Germany some years ago, and so she's relatively tolerant of the whole thing. She
Yeah.
knows she's been involved in the music business since she was 15 and knows what it's like, and she's able to travel with me sometimes, either working or not working, so it's nice.
Right. I read a little quote that you had said, I think it's you, about practicing, and if you don't practice for one day, that you notice it.
All right.
How does
Yeah,
that go?
I was paraphrasing someone else.
Yes.
I think it dates back to one of the great classical musicians or something. I heard it from George Van Epps.
Uh-huh.
If you have George Van Epps, yeah, if I don't practice for one day, I notice it. If I don't practice for 2 days, well, the conductor knows it. And if I don't practice for 3 days, everybody notices.
Yeah. What's your practice, if you sit to practice, what do you practice these days?
Well, I try to practice some things that cover all the technical moves, but I try to practice things that involve, again, musical context. So I try to play some things that have a lot of single notes, like some Bach preludes or something like that, and try to practice some chordal things. I try to play through some tunes and explore some new tunes I'm learning, and a little bit of stuff like that, basically. Yeah. Not enough, of course, but
When you get to these festivals, you had mentioned, I think before the tape was rolling, that you were interested in seeing the schedule because you didn't quite sure who was going to be here.
Yeah, well, I wasn't
And
in this case.
you don't know who you're going to play with until sometime the afternoon of the gig.
Quite often, or sometimes a few minutes before the set.
Right. And in some respects, it's an adventure. Do you ever get grouped with people that some promoter or whomever didn't quite realize that this wasn't going to be the match made in heaven?
Not very often, I'm glad to say. In fact, I can't think of any time right now. Well, when I come to a thing like this, a jazz party, most of the musicians, in fact, all of them actually, I've known for some years too. So
Yeah.
they're all friends. I just wasn't sure exactly who was going to be here or what combination we'd be in.
Yeah.
It does give you, sometimes, like when I went to Australia, I went by myself, and I knew I was playing with some local bass players and drummers. I'd asked for bass and drums in a couple of cities, and a little bit of apprehension at first, knowing exactly what they'd sound like and who was going to be there. But like the first bass player and drummer I had in Sydney for a few nights, I got together with them in the afternoon, and they wanted to rehearse and play. We played about 8 bars, and I knew everything would be fine.
Yeah. Okay. End of rehearsal.
And of course, they wanted to keep playing though. Hey, this is fun. Let's play some more. I said, well, everything's gonna be cool. Don't worry about it. Just don't think about it. And for the most part, once you get to a certain level, most players are gonna fit in with each other one way or the other.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get some pleasant surprises or get some new ideas from people too. It's like just meeting a new person and getting their viewpoint on everything.
Right. Have you ever been a teacher of guitar? Do you?
Yeah.
You said the California Institute.
Yeah, when I mentioned
guitar.
after I finished there, I stayed on as first kind of an assistant. That was classes of guitars.
Wow.
But teaching various specialized subjects, whether it was sight reading or harmony or things like that. I did that for a couple of years in between other things. And then, quite frankly, I got really tired of hearing the little plink-plink of guitars all the time and took an extended leave of absence, which is still going on. And in between, I was doing some gigs in California, moved to New York. And basically, I get together with people usually on a 1 or 2 shot basis because I can't keep a regular schedule. And if you're going to study the guitar, you really need to have like some kind of regular follow through, but I try to give some pointers and some troubleshooting and ideas to look at.
Get involved in jazz education at all?
Well, just from what you've said, and a few times I've done some little so-called clinics at colleges and stuff, and
Right.
usually with guitarists, but sometimes with the whole groups and stuff, give them some ideas for ensemble playing and things like that. So, to a limited extent.
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, the jazz education material that's out there is so huge, voluminous now anyway. There's so much stuff to study. There's access to, you know, to knowing what kind of scale to play over what chord and everything like that. And there's access to recorded material of practically the entire history of jazz, which has never happened before, really, you know. You think back to the 40s and people were like digging around trying to find 178 from 1929 of Louis Armstrong, and now you can go out and buy like everything he recorded on about 10 CDs or 20 CDs. So I usually, again, try to deal with the type of things that I learned from playing with the players that I've been able to play with, you know, aesthetic considerations, fine points of performance, and thinking about what you're playing.
Does it, do you feel the market is oversaturated with any of that? I mean, there's so much out there.
You mean in terms of recordings?
I guess. I've noticed the, usually at the jazz parties, they'll have the tables set up with the CDs, and it goes, you know, there's so much. And I feel like, gee, I wish I could buy one of each, because I'm sure all these guys deserve to have their CDs bought.
Yeah. I think there could be, actually. I mean, it's, again, it's so... There's been so much of it, and not, I mean, just on one CD, you know. When you go to make a record, now, of course, they start out making 78s, making 2 good sides, you know, or maybe 4 sides in a day. Then it became LPs, and people were making 30 to 40 minutes of music. And now everybody's trying to make at least 60 minutes of music, and maybe more, so the consumer doesn't feel like they're being gypped. And so you're trying to fit all this stuff on. It's hard to make sometimes you just want to make a more concise statement sometimes. But yeah, it is pretty saturated, quite to tell you the truth. And you've got to, I mean, if someone who's relatively new to jazz goes to a record store, they really have to either be guided or know what they're looking for. And then, of course, it's just impossible to keep up with all the new stuff that's coming out. You know, there's so many, there's a lot of great artists out, and they're putting out so much, but you don't know where to start. So it's just the way it is, I guess.
I wanted to play something for you and get your comment on this.
Oh, boy. Oh, that's George's piece.
Yeah. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good.
Who is that guy?
Yeah, well, of course, that's me playing one of George Van Epps's pieces from the 30s.
From the dates to the 30s?
Oh, yeah.
The piece?
Yeah, probably 1936, 37, something like that.
Now, did you take this piece and, let's say, sophisticate the harmony? Or was that, he was doing this in the 30s?
That's every note that he wrote down.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I hear a lot of, like, really close voices in there. And do you have to, like, check this out now? I'm not going to just pull this off the first time.
Oh,
There's some practice involved.
No, you know, and that was on the 6th string, of course, probably written before George even started playing the 7th string. I found an old folio of like 3 solos that was published back there. A friend of mine gave me a Xerox copy, and I was checking them out, and I just got intrigued by playing them. And since it was my first record with George too, I wanted to do one of his things on there, and knew it had never been recorded and stuff like that. But no, George was. I mean, he's such a meticulous person too. But every voice is in place, and it's all written out and scored. And I just basically wanted to play it.
Right.
You know?
So what makes it jazz if it's all written out?
Well, it's mainly the feeling and the spirit of the times, basically. You know, it's not. You know, it's. What was I going to say? The other thing is that's an example of a time. You know, at that time, people like Carl Crest too, and George and some other guitar players, they were really interested in playing the whole instrument getting as much out of it as they could. You know, there's little 2-note things, there's full chords, there's 3-note voicings, little voices moving in between, and it's just a way of playing that you don't hear much anymore. And I think of that period, George's playing in that style was the most sophisticated, all due respect to Carl Kress and Dick McDonough and stuff, but sometimes their playing next to stuff like that sounds a little more simplistic, you know, although it had a great feel and stuff.
Could this could this be pulled off on an acoustic instrument? That particular piece.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah. At that time, it was probably written, or he was probably playing acoustic most of the time at that time.
That was
too.
the amps were just
getting started.
Getting started.
Yeah. In fact, George told me apparently around 1934, 33, 34, the Epiphone Company, I think? Yeah. Was making a thing called the Electar that he was starting to play a little bit, but was a little too advanced for, like Benny Goodman refused to let him play it with his band, and finally, I guess towards the end of the late 30s, Ray Noble let him use it on a few numbers, but there's no recordings of it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to remember who historically they consider to be the first guy to play amplified.
Well, the first guy to really make it popular, of course, was Charlie Christian.
Yeah.
There were other guys. I mean, George Barnes was playing electric guitar at the same time, maybe a year or two earlier. Heard some air checks from a radio show from about 1937 or something with George Barnes, and it's pretty amazing. It sounds almost exactly like his playing 40 years later.
Yeah.
Still got the articulation and the little phrasing things. And there were some steel guitar players that were also amplified too.
Oh.
Floyd Smith made a record with Andy Kirk's band called Floyd's Guitar Blues.
Oh.
And it's really hard to tell exactly who was the first.
Right. What's in the future for you? If I was to sit with you in a few years from now, and we could talk about that you've been doing what?
Well, hopefully playing better. And I don't know. Quite frankly, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing right now. I just want to do more of it, and like I said, get better. I'd like to. Actually, I'm working on doing some more solo guitar playing. I'm doing. I've always enjoyed doing a little bit over the years and stuff. I'm trying to do more of that, both on the electric and acoustic 7-string.
Yeah.
And
try to keep the overhead low.
Exactly. Yeah. Keep the music swinging and the overhead low.
Is there a racial thing happening in jazz right now that one way or the other?
I'm not really sure. It crops up from time to time, although it seems more a creation of the writers and promoters. All the musicians I know, of whatever denomination or color and stuff, all get along with each other fine. There doesn't seem to be any barriers there, personally, musically. But I do think sometimes that a lot of times the record producers and promoters want an all black or all white band or an all young band or something like that, and that is not good.
Yeah.
Of course, I've been playing over the years with both black and white musicians. Older musicians, never had any problem with them. All the younger musicians I know, I've never had any problem with them either. So unfortunately, I think it's more a creation of the media as such. But it is there sometimes,
Yeah, I see it in the audience too, not just the.
Yeah.
I mean, even more in the audience.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true. And I'm not sure exactly why. It's kind of a drag. The last time I did one of those jazz cruises a couple of years ago, again, I'd be playing with Flip Phillips, Kenny DeVerne, Milt Hinton on bass. Look out, audience is all white, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I look in the next room, Red Holloway and Sweets Edison would be playing, who are friends of mine. I play with them, we get along fine, and the audience would be all black, for whatever reason. And I wish they'd, the white people could gain a lot by listening to Sweets and Red and vice versa,
Right.
And it's just this thing that's subconscious with them or something, I don't know, with both groups.
You've mentioned a couple times one of our favorite people at Hamilton, and that's Milt Hinton.
Yeah.
He's quite a treasure.
He sure is.
As Mona.
Yep.
Yeah.
I met Milt when I first came to play with Joe Bushkin, and just felt at home with him. He's always so supportive, and he's just, well, you know, he's so supportive of younger musicians, older musicians, everybody, and there's no one who's ever played bass like him before, too. Just the sound of his playing is just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Is there such a thing for you, working with drummers? Sometimes you hear the phrase playing on top of the beat, playing behind the beat. Does that exist for you, or is that just something people make up?
I'm not really sure. I've heard that off and on over the years, and I've thought about it, and I guess it sort of exists. I don't know if playing on the top of the beat is just rushing or not, but
Like rushing without speeding up, I guess.
yeah, I don't think that really exists, though. The more I think about it,
Yeah.
if you're playing on the top of the beat, you're just slightly rushing. That's all. And if the other guy's trying not to rush, maybe you'll hold him back, maybe not.
Right.
I know that with the great drummers I've gotten to play with, it's usually just settled into just a great groove, and whether it's Jake or Al Harewood, any of those guys. Yeah, I don't think it really exists.
Yeah.
Ask Jake about it. You'll get a good answer from him.
I will. Let's suppose you, just to wrap up here, let's suppose you could put a dream band together to do a 6-month tour of the world.
That's a hard question, because
Yeah,
I've got several dream bands in mind.
Let's say it was a rhythm section with 3 horn players.
Rhythm section with 3 horn players.
Is that a group that you would want to do?
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
it would be. Gosh, there's so many.
I know there's so many people.
You really put me on the spot there, because I could do about a half a dozen dream bands. Actually, one of the greatest drummers I played with recently is Lewis Nash. I love playing with him. And I don't know, Michael Moore is still my favorite bass player.
Yeah.
Period. There's a lot of other great bass players, too.
Michael seems to play really, how shall I put it, like a melody player almost. He seems to play a lot higher on his instrument.
He does on his solos, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays mostly up in the cello range. But his solos, I don't know, no matter what else has been going on before, he always comes in, he's got such a focus and poise to his playing. It's just amazing. It amazes me, too, that someone could sit there and play time for, 30 choruses while everybody else does their thing.
Yeah.
And then come in and just play this incredibly beautiful thing, and make everything else sound silly. Gosh, well, Ken Poplawski I love to play with.
Yeah.
That's a hard choice,
Well, it was just a
trumpets.
question for fun.
Yeah, I know. I'm taking it very seriously, but Ruby Braff is one of my favorite players. On the other hand, Nicholas Payton is playing just so great these days, too. So maybe I could have an A and B band or something.
Yeah, right. Have you been in the role of a leader?
Off and on over the years.
Yeah.
Of course, I led a band with the trombonist Dan Barrett off and on for a number of years. We
Right.
had a little quintet that we used to try to rehearse and write things for and stuff. And occasionally I'm put in the leadership of more or less of a ad hoc or ad lib type of band, too.
Yeah.
Put things together.
Is it frustrating to not be able to bring your own, let's say, group as much as you might like?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Although, like I said, I enjoy going and playing with new bassists and drummers and trying out different things. So that's just the reality of the music business. Until I get to a certain level where I can take out my own group all the
Right.
time, it's still
Yeah.
good.
Well, even the guys that have been around for a long, long time, they just travel by themselves occasionally.
Sure. Yeah, it's rare when you can take out a working group all the time.
Right. I guess that's part of what jazz is,
Well,
is dealing with, having a vocabulary so you can deal with.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You took the
that's-
words out of my mouth,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, that's what makes it interesting. And it is amazing, when you leave New York and go to someplace in Germany or Australia, for instance, and sit down and be comfortable right away with these people. So it really is, it's pretty much a universal language, as it were,
Yeah.
by now.
Seems to be one of the things America's really provide it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of an upbeat note, and I hope you enjoy your stay here in Aspen.
I always do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't been here for about 3 years, but I made the first few parties they had, and it was,
Yeah.
missed it.
And you're off to where after this?
Back to New York, working a week in a club with Ken Poplowski and Michael Moore, and then a week after that at Sweet Basil's with Benny Waters.
Oh, you're going to do the Benny Waters.
Yeah, yeah. World's oldest
Yeah.
and strongest saxophone player.
Yeah. He's a trip.
Yeah, he sure is.
Yeah.
And after that, a few things, going to Japan for a couple weeks, a
Uh-huh.
little tour, and whatever else happens after that.
Yeah. Great. Well, best of luck to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay.